Good morning everyone, and welcome to this virtual assembly. This is the first in a series on the Ten Commandments. We're going to have a look at the story of Moses leading up to when he received those Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai. And then over the next few weeks we're going to take a few of the commandments and just think about what they mean to us today. So let's start with a game. We're going to look at some traffic signs from around the world and see if we can work out what they mean. So we've got some traffic signs to have a look at, traffic signs from around the world. So here we go with the first one. Do we think this means beware of reindeer, beware of deer, or beware of moose? Well, that one, let's have a look at the answer. Beware of moose. What about this one? A scenic route, a risk of ice, or heavy snow possible? Any guesses? Well, that one means a risk of ice. This one here could be a man with an umbrella in the ground, could be roadworks, or it could be women digging for buried treasure. What do you think that one is? It would be excellent if it was one of the A or C, but sadly it means roadworks. So this one, I'm not going to give you any options here, but I reckon you can work that one out. That's one from way down in the south, and that one is actually from the Falkland Islands, which is not far from Antarctica, and it means there are penguins crossing, believe it or not. Now this one, we don't actually know what it means, but I think it could be beware of flying bicycles, maybe not quite flying in an aeroplane sense, but my best guess is a bumpy road and bicycles could fly into the air if you're not careful, but I think that's a pretty awesome traffic sign. And this one, what's wrong with that one? Yes, it says look right, but it's pointing left. I like this one. Caution, falling cows. And finally, a sign telling squirrels they've got to drive carefully. Very sensible. We don't want our squirrels speeding, do we? So we have these road signs. They're there to guide and to help us, to keep us safe. And the Ten Commandments are God's way of helping us know the right way to live, to care for each other. And we're just going to watch a video together which takes us up from the story of Moses to the time he received the Ten Commandments, and then after that we'll have a quiz.
The Faithful Hall of Fame, Moses. This is Moses, who was an Israelite born in Egypt, in a time when Israelite boys were not supposed to live.
Wait, huh?
Moses, however, grew up in the palace of the Pharaoh, the very man who was enslaving the Israelite people. When Moses grew up, he made a big mistake and fled Egypt to live with the Midianites. But God called Moses back to Egypt to deliver his people with the help of his brother Aaron. After God showed his miraculous power in Egypt, he led the Israelites through the Red Sea and towards the Promised Land. They followed God, who showed himself as a cloud by day and fire by night. As God led them through the wilderness, the Israelites became thirsty and hungry. They complained to Moses and Aaron and said, "If only we had died in Egypt." God said to Moses that he would provide for his people.
Hey!
Each morning they awoke and found manna for the day.
What's that?
And each night God gave them meat. The people were still thirsty, and they were mad at Moses, saying, "Did you bring us out here to die of thirst?"
Yeah.
So Moses cried out to God, and God told Moses to strike a rock, and water came flowing out of it for the people to drink. And so the Lord provided for his people's needs. After traveling in the desert for 3 months, they came to Mount Sinai, and God called Moses from the top of the mountain. God spoke to Moses there of the future of his people and reminded him of the miracles of the past. After 3 days, there was thunder and lightning as a thick cloud covered the mountain. The people heard a loud trumpet blast. And Moses led people to the foot of the mountain to meet with God. God told them how his people were to live and how they were to honor him and respect each other. The Israelites had seen for themselves that God had spoken to Moses from heaven. These rules that God told them are called the 10 Commandments. And the Israelites feared God, for his mighty power had brought them out of slavery and provided for them in the desert.
So I hope you enjoyed that video that gave us an introduction to the story of the Ten Commandments. It showed us how Moses came out of Egypt with his people and then led them to Mount Sinai eventually. But let's just do a quiz to see how much we can remember. So right at the start of the story, who was it who rescued Moses from the River Nile? Was it the princess or his sister? If you're watching this in class, you could always have a vote now. Votes for the princess and votes for his sister. Moses was rescued by the princess. And if you remember, Moses' mom had placed him in the river to protect him from Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh's daughter, the princess, had found him and rescued him. And then Moses was brought up in the royal palace until he realized his people were being tortured and persecuted, and they were in fact slaves. And remember, they were building the pyramids, and God had spoken to Moses through a burning bush in the desert, told him to go to Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." And of course Pharaoh said no, he wasn't going to let these people go. They were doing all the hard work. But eventually he was persuaded to do so. But why? Was it because he was a kind and nice person, or were there some plagues? Have a vote now. And if you have voted for the plagues, you are correct. Remember those 10 plagues, like frogs appearing all over the whole country, like darkness for 3 days, like locusts infecting the whole of Egypt. 10 plagues, and eventually Pharaoh said to Moses, "Go, you know, take your people away if these plagues will stop." And then they were trapped, though, weren't they? Remember, Pharaoh changed his mind and sent his soldiers back to bring them back into captivity, and they were trapped by a sea in front of them. But was that the Black Sea or the Red Sea? You notice in the picture this sea opened in two. It split in half so they could cross, and then the waters flooded back. But which sea was it? Well, that one was the Red Sea. When they crossed the Red Sea, they spent time in the desert, and I've told you how they spent time looking for food and water, and we saw on the video how God provided these things the food came from the sky and just fell there and appeared in the morning. But where did they get the water from? Did an oasis appear every day that had plenty of water? Or did water come pouring out of the rocks? Well, they did find water from the rocks. We're not sure really how that happened, whether there were waterfalls there or springs, or I think God just provided water in an amazing way. But whatever, water came from the rocks. And then a final question in this mini quiz. They reached Mount Sinai, and God told Moses he was going to give him some rules, some commandments to help his people live in the right way. How many? 10 commandments or 12 commandments? I suspect you know that there are 10 commandments. Excellent. Well, we're just going to have a little think now about why these commandments were given and what perhaps we can take from this even today. So we left Moses having just received these 10 commandments, and I'm speaking to you from the cinema because there's been many great epic movies made about the 10 commandments, and throughout history these have been really important for many civilizations, including ours. Many of our laws come from the 10 commandments, and we're going to be looking at some of those specific laws over the next few weeks, like don't hurt each other, don't steal, and don't lie. But the first 4 commandments are more to do with the Christian faith. They're to do with loving God, and the second 6 are perhaps more for general. They're to do with general moral laws. They're still very important to the Christian faith, but I would say that all faiths and people of no faith would still see these as moral laws. But just quickly on these first 4 commandments, for Christians, Jesus said that to summarize the 10 commandments, you could split them in half. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. And you can see that from these commandments on the screen now. You've got the first 4 actually, which are to do with loving God. Things like don't using God's name like a swear word, about don't bowing down to false gods, keeping a day which Christians have as Sunday, a special day where you can focus on God, and that's why Christians will go to church on a Sunday. And then you have the second 6, which are more to do with how we treat each other. So that's the sort of introduction to the 10 commandments, and I'm just going to say a prayer because I think these are really important rules. They help us focus on how we relate to other people and what we think about our own faith as well. And then we'll finish our virtual assembly with a song. Dear God, we thank you for the story of Moses. We thank you for how you provided for the people while they were in the desert, and how you gave them guidelines, rules on the right way to live. We pray in these difficult times that you will continue to provide for us, and we especially pray for the vaccinations that are happening at the moment, and that these will have a massive impact on the lives of people who receive them. And we thank you for the continued work of those in the front line, and ask that you will be watching over them as well. So let's do a song. This is a song called Bigger Than a Burger, and it focuses on God's love, which is what the first 4 commandments are about. It's one some of you might know. I've done it in a few of the schools before. It's a really easy song to pick up with some good actions as well.
Bit of guitar. Take more of your burger.
God's love is bigger than a burger, it is bigger than a mouse, bigger than an elephant and bigger than a house, bigger than a bus and bigger than a tree, bigger than a mountain, bigger than the sea. What about the cloud? What about the sky? What about the earth? What about the moon? What about the sun? What about the stars? Is anything bigger than this? No. Big and wonderful, big and wonderful, big and wonderful, wonderful love. Big and wonderful, big and wonderful, big and wonderful love, love, love. God's love is bigger than a burger, it is bigger than a mouse, bigger than an elephant and bigger than a house, bigger than a bus and bigger than a tree, bigger than a mountain, bigger than the sea. What about a cloud?